Ambassador Nahai stood in the center of the Great Council chamber and felt the weight of 47 failures pressing down on her shoulders. The room stretched high above her, built by species who had crossed the stars when humanity still lived in caves. Crystal pillars reached toward a ceiling that showed the galaxy itself, spinning slowly in all its terrible beauty. Around her, the representatives of 200 species sat in their designated seats, looking down at her with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. She had been here 47 times in 3 years. Each time she came with evidence. Each time she asked for justice. Each time she left with nothing but empty promises and meaningless words. "Honorable Council," she began, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. "I come before you once again to report attacks on human settlements by the Kral Dominion. Overseer Velthric, a massive reptilian creature whose species had ruled the Council for 6 centuries, waved one clawed hand dismissively. Ambassador Na, we have heard these complaints before. The Kral are a proud warrior species with different cultural values. Perhaps if humanity showed more strength, they would not be such tempting targets." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Nahai felt her jaw tighten, but she continued. 3 months ago, 5 human merchant ships disappeared near the Kral border. 2 months ago, a mining colony on Titan 7 went silent. Last month, raiders attacked a passenger transport carrying 4,000 civilians. We found the wreckage. We found the bodies. We found Kral weapons at every site. "Evidence of weapons proves nothing," another council member said, their voice translated through a device that made it sound like wind through metal pipes. "Weapons can be purchased by anyone." Nahai pulled out a small device and activated it. A hologram filled the center of the chamber, showing a planet from orbit. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. Then the image changed. Bright flashes appeared across one continent. The flashes grew, merged, spread. Within minutes, the entire continent was burning. The oceans boiled. The atmosphere turned black. "This was New Sol Colony," Nahai said quietly. "Population 2.3 million. 58% were children. The Kral fleet appeared without warning 3 days ago. They bombarded the planet for 6 hours. There were no military targets, no strategic value. They did it because they could." The chamber fell silent. For a moment, Nahai thought she might have finally reached them. Then Overseer Velthric spoke again. "A tragedy, certainly. However, New Sol was built in a disputed territory. The Kral have claimed that region for centuries. Perhaps humanity should have shown more respect for established borders." "Established by whom?" Nahai demanded. "We filed proper colonization claims. We followed every council regulation. We paid every fee. We waited the required 10 years for approval." Yes, Velthric said, his tone suggesting he was already tired of the conversation. "And we express our deepest concern over this incident. The Council will form a committee to study the matter. We will issue a strongly worded statement condemning violence. We will recommend that both sides pursue diplomatic solutions." Nahai looked around the chamber at the faces of species who had lived for centuries, who had built empires, who considered themselves wise and civilized. She saw no justice in their eyes. She saw only the cold calculation of those who had never been weak, who had never been hunted, who had never watched their children burn. Behind her, the chamber doors opened. Captain Li Hyun walked in, moving like a man in a dream. His uniform was scorched and torn. Dried blood covered his face and hands. He had been the commander of New Sol's orbital defense. His 3 destroyers had fought the Kral fleet for as long as they could. He had watched his ships die one by one. He had watched his crew die. He had escaped in a damaged shuttle only because his first officer had locked him in it and launched it by force. Li Hyun walked to the center of the chamber and stood beside Nahai. He looked up at the council with empty eyes. "I have a message from Admiral Kang Tae, commander of the Human Defense Fleet," he said. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but in the silent chamber everyone heard him. "He asked me to deliver it personally." Overseer Velthric leaned forward with interest. "The Council always welcomes communication from human military authorities." Li Hyun reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. He held it up for everyone to see, then dropped it on the floor. The chip shattered, scattering pieces across the polished stone. "That was his message," Li Hyun said. "He said to tell you that humanity is done asking for permission. We are done begging for justice. We are done pretending that this council cares about anything except maintaining the power of species who were old when we were young." The chamber erupted in outrage. Council members shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Security guards moved forward, their hands on their weapons. Nahi raised her voice above the chaos. Effective immediately, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will no longer recognize Council authority over human space. We will no longer abide by Council regulations or restrictions. We will defend ourselves by ourselves using whatever means we deem necessary. Overseer Velthric slammed his clawed fist on his desk, creating a boom that silenced the chamber. You cannot simply leave the Council. There are treaties, agreements, trade relationships. All terminated, Nahi said. Humanity thanks those species who dealt with us fairly. As for the rest, you will find that we remember every insult, every dismissal, every time you told us to be patient while our people died. She turned and began walking toward the doors. Li Hyun followed her. Behind them, the council dissolved into chaos. As they reached the corridor outside, Li Hyun spoke quietly. Do you think we can win? Nahai thought about Admiral Kang Tae, who had spent 20 years preparing for a war he hoped would never come. She thought about the shipyards humanity had built in secret, in systems no one else wanted. She thought about the weapons designed by scientists who remembered what it felt like to be helpless. Yes, she said, but that's not the question you should be asking. The question is whether we can win without becoming like them. They walked through the corridors of Station Prime, past the representatives of species who had existed for millennia. Behind them, Overseer Velthric was already making calls, already dismissing the human threat. Let the children play at war, he told his aides, his voice full of contempt. They will learn that mercy is weakness and weakness is death. Perhaps this lesson will teach them their place. Far away in a command center deep beneath the surface of Earth, Admiral Kang Tae received confirmation that Nahai and Li Hyun were safely away from the station. He looked at the tactical display showing the positions of human fleets, the locations of Kral military installations, the coordinates of every target humanity had identified over 3 long years of being patient. He entered the authorization code that would begin Operation Reckoning. Across human space, ships that had been waiting in the dark began to move. Soldiers who had trained for this moment checked their weapons one final time. Pilots strapped into fighters and bombers that the galaxy had never seen before. The clock on the wall showed 72 hours until the first strike. Kang Tae knew that in 72 hours and 6 minutes, the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity finally stopped being patient. The first indication that something was wrong came at dawn on 17 different worlds. The Kral military installations followed the same routine they had followed for centuries. Guard shifts changed. Patrol ships launched. Command centers began their daily briefings. Everything was normal until it suddenly was not. On Kral Outpost 7, Commander Park Ji and her Ghost Battalion materialized out of nothing in the center of the command center. The Kral soldiers stared in shock at the 30 humans who appeared without warning, without sound, without any sensor detecting their approach. Park Ji raised her weapon and fired before anyone could react. The weapon made no sound. There was no flash of light, no explosion. The Kral commander simply ceased to exist, along with the wall behind him and the floor beneath him. A perfect sphere of matter vanished, leaving only vacuum that imploded with a thunderous crack as air rushed in to fill the space. Secure the facility, Park Ji said calmly. Kill anyone who fights. Capture anyone who surrenders. Destroy anything that looks like a communication system. Her soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. They wore armor that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible. They carried weapons that violated every law of war the Council had ever written. In 6 minutes, Outpost 7 fell silent. In 8 minutes, Ghost Battalion was already moving to the next target. The same scene repeated across 8 star systems. Human strike teams appeared where they should not be able to appear, carrying weapons that should not exist, destroying military targets with surgical precision. The Kral, who prided themselves on being the galaxy's greatest warriors, found themselves fighting ghosts. In orbit above the Kral homeworld, Warlord Draxus received the first reports and laughed. The humans are desperate, he told his commanders. They strike at minor outposts while we hold all the major systems. Let them exhaust themselves. Then we will crush them. He ordered his personal fleet to deploy. 200 warships, the pride of the Kral military, launched from their berths around the homeworld. They formed into battle formation and jumped toward the coordinates where human forces had been detected. They emerged into what appeared to be empty space. Sensors detected nothing. Visual scans showed only stars. Then Captain Yoon Sung gave the order, and the darkness came alive. The human ships had been waiting, sitting perfectly still, their hulls coated in materials that absorbed every wavelength of radiation. They had been there for 3 days, waiting in silence. Now they activated their systems and revealed themselves. The Horizon-class dreadnoughts were massive, larger than anything humanity had built before. Each one carried weapons that drew power directly from the quantum foam of reality itself. When they fired, space itself seemed to scream. The first volley destroyed 40 crawl ships in an instant. The second volley took 30 more. The crawl fleet, which had entered the battle confident of victory, suddenly found itself trying desperately just to survive. "Break formation," Warlord Draxus screamed. "Scatter and regroup." But there was nowhere to scatter to. Human fighter squadrons poured from the dreadnoughts like angry insects. Each fighter was small, fast, and piloted by humans who had grown up in simulators that made real combat seem easy by comparison. The crawl pilots, who had trained in real battle against inferior opponents, discovered that all their experience meant nothing against enemies who were simply better. Captain Yoon Sung watched the battle from his command chair and felt nothing but cold determination. He remembered New Seoul. He remembered the images of burning cities and boiling oceans. He remembered the council doing nothing. "Target their command ship," he ordered. "I want Warlord Draxus to see this coming." The Horizon fired its main weapon, a beam of coherent energy that carved through vacuum like a hot knife through flesh. The beam struck Draxus's flagship in the center, punching through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable, through armor that was supposed to be unbreakable. The ship split in two, atmosphere venting in great frozen clouds, debris spinning away into the dark. Yoon Sung opened a broadcast on all frequencies. "Warlord Draxus, this is Captain Yoon Sung of the Terran Defense Fleet. Your flagship is destroyed. Your fleet is destroyed. You have 1 hour to order all crawl forces to stand down. If you refuse, we will begin targeting your orbital stations. After that, we will target your shipyards. After that, we will target every military installation on your homeworld." There was a long silence. Then a weak signal came from one of the escape pods. "This is Warlord Draxus. You dare threaten the homeworld?" "I am not threatening," Yoon Sung said quietly. "I am explaining the sequence of events that will occur if you do not surrender. You killed 2.3 million humans on New Seoul. You burned our world and called it glory. Now you will learn what humans call justice." Around the galaxy, the news spread faster than the human fleets themselves. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak suddenly scrambled to understand what was happening. The Crawl, who had seemed invincible, were retreating on every front. Human forces appeared where they should not be able to go, struck where defenses should have held, won battles that should have been impossible. On Station Prime, Overseer Veltrick convened an emergency council session. The chamber that had been half empty when Nahai spoke was now packed with representatives demanding answers. "How did they build such weapons?" one ambassador demanded. "We monitor all species' military development." "Apparently not well enough," someone else responded. Veltrick pulled up reports from Council intelligence services. The news was worse than anyone had imagined. The humans had not simply hidden their weapons development. They had built entire shipyards in systems everyone had thought were worthless. They had recruited scientists from their civilian universities, people who had never registered as military researchers. They had turned their merchant fleet into a logistics network capable of supplying a war across a dozen star systems simultaneously. "How long have they been planning this?" Veltrick asked quietly. An intelligence officer, a small mammalian species known for attention to detail, answered hesitantly. "We believe they began planning approximately 3 years ago." Shortly after the fourth time, Ambassador Nahai came before the council to report Crawl attacks. 3 years, Veltrick repeated. "They spent 3 years preparing for war while pretending to seek peace." "No, sir," the intelligence officer said. "Analysis suggests they spent 3 years preparing for war while genuinely seeking peace. Every time they came to us, every time they filed a complaint, every time they asked for help, they were sincere. We are the ones who forced them to prepare for war by refusing to help them." The chamber fell silent. Outside the windows, stars shone with the same indifferent light they had shone for billions of years. Inside, the representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species began to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. Back in human space, Admiral Kang Tae sat in his command center and watched tactical displays update in real time. Every target they had identified was either destroyed or captured. Krall forces were in full retreat. Allied species that had supported the Krall were frantically trying to distance themselves. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we are receiving surrender offers from 14 Krall systems." "Accept them," Kang Tae said. "Make it clear that we will accept nothing less than complete disarmament and reparations for damages. Make it very clear that if they refuse, we will continue the war until the Krall Dominion ceases to exist." The officer hesitated. "Sir, some of our allies are concerned that we are being too aggressive. They suggest we should negotiate." Kang Tae looked at the young officer with tired eyes. "Tell our allies that we negotiated for 3 years while the Krall killed our people. Tell them that we followed every rule, respected every treaty, and begged for help from a council that did nothing. Tell them that we are done negotiating from weakness. The Krall will surrender, or they will face the consequences." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth turning slowly in the void. Somewhere down there, in cities and towns and villages, people were celebrating the first day of war. They thought it was glorious. They thought it was justice finally served. Kang Tae knew better. He knew that every Krall soldier who died was someone's son or daughter. He knew that every ship destroyed represented years of labor and resources. He knew that war, even just war, left scars that never fully healed. But he also knew that sometimes the only way to stop predators was to show them you had claws of your own. By day 3, the galaxy had stopped laughing at humanity and started fearing them. The Krall Dominion, which had terrorized a dozen species for centuries, was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. Colony after colony surrendered or simply evacuated, their populations fleeing to anywhere that seemed safe. The Krall fleet, which had numbered over 1,000 warships, was reduced to scattered survivors hiding in asteroid fields and dead systems. President Choi Dae watched the reports from his office on Earth and felt no satisfaction. He was an old man who had fought in humanity's early colonial wars, back when they struggled against pirates and raiders. He had hoped to spend his final years building peace. Instead, he was presiding over the most devastating war the galaxy had seen in living memory. His assistant entered the office. "Sir, the Galactic Council has summoned you to Station Prime. They demand an immediate ceasefire and your presence to explain human actions." Choi Dae looked up from the reports. "Tell them I will not be attending. Sir, they are threatening sanctions and possible military intervention." "Let them threaten," Choi Dae said quietly. "We are no longer interested in councils that enable genocide. If they want to talk, they can come here. If they want to fight, they can try. But we will not go begging to them again." The assistant left and Choi Dae returned to the reports. One caught his attention. A young fighter pilot named Lieutenant Han Yu had single-handedly destroyed a Krall fortress moon. According to the report, her squadron had been assigned to harass the fortress, while heavy ships moved into position. Instead, Han Yu had noticed a design flaw in the fortress's shields and exploited it. She had flown her fighter through a gap that should have been impossible to navigate, avoided defensive fire that should have killed her 100 times over, and delivered her entire payload directly into the fortress's power core. The explosion had been visible from 3 star systems away. Choi Dae pulled up her service record. She was 23 years old. She had joined the military not for glory or adventure, but because she had been a medical student on New Sol, visiting family when the Krall attacked. She had escaped on one of the last shuttles off the planet. Everyone else she knew had died in the bombardment. The gun camera footage from her fighter was spreading across the galaxy faster than any news service could track. Species that had never heard of humanity were watching this young woman do the impossible. She became a symbol without meaning to. A living example that humans did not need overwhelming force, just overwhelming determination. On the neutral world of Celis, Observer Thel watched the footage for the 10th time and knew he was witnessing history. He was a member of the Celan species, known throughout the galaxy for their neutral journalism. He had covered wars, disasters, and diplomatic crises for 40 years. He had never seen anything like this. He began broadcasting independent reports, something the Celan rarely did. His species preferred to simply record events and let others interpret them. But Thel could not stay silent about what he was discovering. "I have spent the last 3 days reviewing human diplomatic records. he said in his broadcast. Every petition they filed, every complaint they made, every request for help they sent to the council. I have also reviewed the responses they received, or rather the lack of responses. He displayed documents showing Nahai's visits to the council, 47 times in 3 years, each time with evidence, each time dismissed. Many are asking how humanity hid their military development, Thel continued. But this is the wrong question. The evidence suggests humanity was not hiding anything. They were preparing openly. They built ships. They trained soldiers. They developed weapons. They did all of this in plain sight while simultaneously begging the council for help. He pulled up more documents. What humanity hid was not their strength. What they hid was their restraint. Every time the council dismissed them, every time they were told to show more patience, they were making a choice. They could have struck earlier. They could have destroyed the Crawl at any point in the last 3 years. Instead, they kept trying diplomacy. They kept hoping the council would act. His broadcast reached billions of viewers across the galaxy. Species that had profited from human weakness suddenly found themselves receiving ominous messages. The messages were simple. After the Crawl, panic spread through systems that had raided human merchant ships, through species that had enslaved human colonists, through corporations that had exploited human labor. They all remembered their crimes and realized that humanity had not forgotten. On Station Prime, Overseer Velthric convened another emergency session. The council chamber was packed with representatives, but the mood had changed dramatically from 3 days earlier. Then they had been confident. Now they were terrified. We must stop this before it spreads, one ambassador said. If humanity defeats the Crawl, other species will think they can challenge the council. Other species will be right, someone else responded. The council failed to protect its members. Why should anyone respect our authority? Velthric slammed his desk for silence. The issue is not whether the council failed. The issue is containing human aggression before it threatens stability. Stability? A new voice spoke up. It was Ambassador Reth of the Tovan species. The Tovans were small, peaceful, and had always deferred to the council. Now Reth stood and addressed the chamber directly. You call it stability when the Crawl raid our borders? When they enslave our people? The only difference between us and humanity is that humans finally stopped accepting injustice. You dare defend them? Velthric demanded. I dare tell the truth, Reth said. The Tovans have lost 17 colonies to Crawl aggression in the last decade. Each time we came before this council, we were told to be patient, to seek diplomatic solutions, to respect Crawl cultural values. We stayed patient because we are weak. Humanity stayed patient because they are strong, and they hoped strength would not be necessary. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species defended the council's decisions. Others, particularly smaller species who had suffered under the protection of larger ones, began speaking up for the first time in years. While the council argued, Lieutenant Han Yu flew another mission. This time she led a squadron escorting medical ships to a Crawl colony world. The colony had surrendered, but they had wounded soldiers and civilians suffering from lack of medical supplies. Human doctors and nurses, many of whom had family members killed by the Crawl, worked alongside their former enemies to save lives. They did not do it because they forgave the Crawl. They did it because, as one doctor explained to Observer Thel's camera, we are showing them what civilization looks like. Admiral Kang Tae issued orders to all human forces. Civilian targets remain off limits. Cultural sites are to be preserved. Any soldier who commits atrocities against prisoners or non-combatants will face trial. We are not fighting for revenge. We are fighting for justice. There is a difference. On the third day, 12 more star systems surrendered to human forces. The Crawl economy, which had been built on conquest and plunder, collapsed. Their currency became worthless. Their trade networks disintegrated. Species that had paid tribute to the Crawl stopped paying. Client species began declaring independence. In his command center, Kang Tae received a priority message. It was from Emperor Zalthos himself, the supreme ruler of the Crawl Dominion. The Emperor was requesting a meeting. Kang Tae considered refusing. Then he thought about Nahai spending 3 years trying to get the council to listen. He thought about the importance of giving even your enemies a chance to choose peace. Tell Emperor Zalthos I will speak with him, Kang Tae said. But make it clear that the meeting does not mean a ceasefire. Our operations continue until he offers terms we can accept. That night, President Choi Dae addressed humanity. His speech was broadcast to every human colony, every ship, every station. 3 days ago, we chose war because peace was denied to us, he said. We are winning that war faster than anyone expected. But victory on the battlefield is not the same as victory for civilization. We must win this war without losing ourselves. We must show the galaxy that humanity can be ruthless without being cruel, strong without being tyrannical, victorious without being vengeful. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The galaxy is watching us. They are seeing what humans do when we finally stop being patient. Let us show them something worth seeing. Let us show them that the strong can choose mercy, that the victorious can choose justice, and that humanity remembers how to be human even in the midst of war. Across human space, soldiers and sailors heard their president's words. Some disagreed, wanting harsher revenge for what had been done to them. Others felt relief that someone was finally saying what they had been thinking. On the Kral homeworld, Emperor Zalthos prepared for his meeting with Admiral Kang Tae and realized for the first time in his long life that he might not survive the week. The humans had proven they could reach anywhere, destroy anything, defeat anyone. The only question remaining was whether they would choose to destroy the Kral entirely or allow them to survive in some diminished form. He looked at his reflection in the polished metal of his throne room and saw an old warrior who had finally met enemies he could not defeat. The humans had been patient not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to wait. Now their patience had ended, and the galaxy was learning what that meant. The troop transports descended through the atmosphere of the Kral homeworld like falling stars. Captain Kim Woo watched through the viewport as the planet's surface grew closer. Cities sprawled across the continents, ancient and proud. This was where the Kral Empire had begun 2,000 years ago. This was where it would end. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot announced. All defensive batteries in our sector are offline. No hostile contacts detected. Kim Woo checked his weapon one final time. Around him, his Marines did the same. They were not here for conquest. They were not here to kill civilians. They had very specific targets, and those targets were all members of the Kral Warcast, who had ordered atrocities against humanity. The ships landed in a park near the capital city's government district. Marines poured out, weapons ready, expecting resistance. Instead, they found thousands of Kral civilians watching silently from behind barriers. The civilians were not armed. They were not protesting. They were simply watching as human soldiers walked through their capital for the first time in history. Remember the rules, Kim Woo told his troops over the radio. We are not at war with civilians. Anyone who does not resist is not a target. Anyone who surrenders is to be taken into custody unharmed. We are here for justice, not revenge. The Marines moved through the streets in disciplined formation. They had maps showing the locations of Warcast headquarters, command centers, and the homes of officials who had personally ordered attacks on human worlds. Intelligence teams had spent 3 years building these lists, verifying every name, confirming every crime. At the palace of the War Council, the Marines found the doors sealed. Kim Woo did not bother trying to negotiate. He signaled to his demolitions expert, who placed a small device on the door. There was a flash of light, and the massive doors simply ceased to exist. Molecules dispersed into atoms too small to see. Inside, the War Council was in session. 30 members of the highest war caste sat around a circular table, arguing about how to respond to the human invasion. They fell silent when Kim Woo and his Marines entered. You are all under arrest for war crimes, Kim Woo said calmly. You will be taken into custody and held for trial. If you resist, you will be killed. If you surrender, you will be treated according to the laws of war that you yourselves claimed to follow. One of the council members, an ancient warrior with scars covering his face, stood slowly. You dare enter our most sacred chamber? You dare threaten the War Council itself? I do not threaten, Kim Woo said. I state facts. You ordered the destruction of New Seoul. You personally approved the attack. 2.3 million humans died because of your decision. You will answer for that. The old warrior looked at Kim Woo with something that might have been respect. If I refuse to surrender, then you will die here in your sacred chamber, and your name will be remembered as a war criminal who was too cowardly to face justice. The warrior considered this. Then slowly he removed his weapons and placed them on the table. One by one, the other council members did the same. They were warriors, and they understood when they had been defeated. Far from the homeworld, Dr. Seo Yoon broadcast from Earth, explaining humanity's strategy to a galaxy that was struggling to understand. She was a xenobiologist, someone who had spent her life studying other species. Now she used that knowledge to show why humanity fought the way it did. We studied Krull society for 3 years, she explained, standing before a holographic display showing the structure of Krull civilization. We learned that their culture has 2 distinct groups. The war caste makes all decisions about military action. The civilian population follows those decisions but has no say in them. By targeting only the war caste, we show that we understand the difference between warriors and civilians, between those who order atrocities and those who simply live under their rule. She changed the display to show human forces moving through Krull cities. Notice that our soldiers avoid civilian areas. Notice that cultural sites remain untouched. Notice that when civilians need medical care, human doctors provide it. We are not here to destroy a species. We are here to stop those specific individuals who chose to commit crimes against humanity. Observer Thel, who had been following human forces since the war began, found Dr. Seo Yoon's explanation fascinating. He broadcast his own analysis. What humanity is demonstrating is something the galaxy has forgotten. War does not have to be total. Justice does not require genocide. Strength can be applied with precision. In his command center, Admiral Kang Tae received the communication request from Emperor Zalthos. He accepted, and the Krull Emperor's face appeared on the screen. Zalthos looked old and tired, his scales dull, his eyes defeated. "Admiral Kang Tae," Zalthos said formally, "I have come to discuss terms of surrender." "There are no terms," Kang Tae replied. "There are only requirements. The Krull Dominion will disarm completely. All weapons of mass destruction will be surrendered to human custody. All war criminals will face trial. Reparations will be paid to all species the Krull have harmed. If you accept these requirements, the war ends. If you refuse, we continue until the Krull Dominion no longer exists." Zalthos was silent for a long moment. "You would destroy an entire species?" "No," Kang Tae said quietly. "We would destroy a government that committed genocide. The Krull people would survive. They would rebuild, under leadership that respects the rights of others. But the Krull Dominion, the empire that thought conquest was glory, that empire would end." "I am that empire," Zalthos said. "I personally ordered the attack on New Sol. I thought humanity would break, would beg, would submit like other weak species have done." "I was wrong." "Yes," Kang Tae agreed. "You were wrong about many things. You were wrong to think patience was weakness. Wrong to think mercy was cowardice. Wrong to think that a species that chooses peace first is unable to wage war." Zalthos leaned forward, his expression intense. "Do you know what terrifies us most about humanity? It is not your weapons. It is not your tactics. It is that you waged this war while maintaining your principles. You could have burned our worlds as we burned yours. You chose not to. That restraint, that ability to hate without becoming what you hate, that is what makes you truly dangerous." "We do not see it as dangerous," Kang Tae said. "We see it as necessary. If we become monsters to fight monsters, then monsters are all that remain. Someone has to remember that there is supposed to be a difference between justice and revenge." Zalthos straightened in his seat. "I will not surrender. I will not stand trial. I will not give you the satisfaction of judging me by your laws." "Then you will die," Kang Tae said simply. "Yes," Zalthos agreed, "but I will die as a Krull warrior, not as your prisoner. I will perform the ritual death with honor, and perhaps when I am gone, my people will learn what I learned too late. That mercy is not weakness. That patience is not cowardice. That humanity gave us every chance to choose peace and we chose war instead." The screen went dark. Kang Tae sat in silence for a moment, then called his intelligence officer. "What do we know about the Krull ritual death?" "It is reserved for leaders who fail their people," the officer explained. "The Emperor will take his own life publicly, accepting responsibility for the defeat. It is considered the most honorable death possible in their culture." Kang Tae nodded slowly. "Let it be known that humanity respects Emperor Zalthos' choice. When he dies, we will honor his death as a warrior, even though we would have preferred to see him face justice as a criminal." Word spread quickly through the Krull worlds. Emperor Zalthos appeared before his people one final time. He wore the ancient armor of the first emperor. He carried the ceremonial blade that had been passed down through 2,000 years of Krull history. "I failed you," he told his people. I led us to war against enemies I did not understand. I thought their patience was weakness. I thought their mercy was foolishness. I thought we could conquer them as we conquered others. I was wrong, and my errors have destroyed our empire." He raised the blade. "I accept responsibility for this failure. I die with honor so that you may live with hope. Follow the humans' requirements. Accept their justice. Learn from them. They are better than we gave them credit for. They are better than we deserved." The blade flashed. Emperor Zalthos fell. The Krull Empire fell with him. By sunset on day 5, the war was effectively over. Krull commanders throughout the galaxy began surrendering. They provided evidence against other species who had encouraged Krull aggression. They revealed secret alliances and hidden crimes. The web of corruption that had protected the strong and exploited the weak began to unravel. Ambassador Nahai, watching from Earth, felt tears running down her face. Not tears of joy, not tears of grief, simply tears of exhaustion after 3 years of fighting for justice that should have been given freely. President Choi Dae found her sitting alone in a garden, looking up at the stars. "It is almost over," he said gently. "Is it?" Nahai asked. "We have won the war. But what have we won? Fear, respect? The right to be left alone?" Choi Dae sat beside her. "We have won the chance to build something better. The council failed because it protected the strong at the expense of the weak. We can create something different. Something where justice is not a privilege but a right." Nahai looked at him. "You think the galaxy will follow us?" "Some will," Choi Dae said. "Some will hate us. Some will fear us. But they will all know that humanity keeps its word. When we say we will protect the innocent, we mean it. When we say we will punish the guilty, we mean it. That credibility is worth more than any empire." Above them, stars shone with ancient light. Tomorrow, the galaxy would be different. Tomorrow, humanity would begin building the peace they had fought for. Tonight, they simply sat in the garden and remembered that sometimes the only way to preserve what is good is to destroy what is evil. Dawn broke over Earth on the 6th day of the war. In cities across the planet, people woke to news that seemed impossible. The Krull Dominion had surrendered completely. Every military installation had been secured. Every war criminal had been identified. Every colony had accepted human authority. The war that was supposed to last years had ended in less than a week. Admiral Kang Tae stood at the window of his command center and watched the sunrise. He had not slept in 6 days. His eyes burned with exhaustion. His hands shook slightly from too much stimulant and too little food. But it was over. The killing had stopped. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "President Choi Dae is asking to speak with you." The president's face appeared on the screen, looking as tired as Kang Tae felt. "Admiral, you have done what you set out to do. The Krull Dominion no longer exists as a military threat. Now comes the harder part. Building the peace," Kang Tae said. "Yes, and for that we need something more than military force. We need to show the galaxy that humanity means what it says about justice and equality." That afternoon, President Choi Dae addressed not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. His message was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every language, sent to every world that had communication technology. 6 days ago, humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council and declared that we would defend ourselves. We have done so. The Krull Dominion, which terrorized peaceful species for centuries, has fallen. But we did not fight this war to build an empire. We did not fight for territory or tribute. We fought for justice. Now we will build something better than what came before. He paused, letting his words sink in across 1,000 worlds. "I am announcing the formation of the Terran Accord, an alliance of mutual defense and cooperation. Any species, any government, any world that believes in justice and equality is welcome to join. In the Accord, there are no superior species. There are no inferior members. Every voice is heard. Every grievance is addressed, and military force protects those who cannot protect themselves." The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had suffered under the Council's indifference suddenly saw an alternative. Smaller civilizations that had been ignored for centuries saw hope. Even some of the larger species began to wonder if the old system had truly served them well. Ambassador Nahai, still on Earth, received a call from President Choi Dae. "I am offering you the position of Chancellor of the Terran Accord," he said. "You spent 3 years trying to make the Council work. Now you can build something that actually does. Nahai thought about those 3 years. The humiliation, the dismissals, the slow realization that the system she believed in was fundamentally broken. What makes you think the Accord will be any different? Because it will be judged by its actions, not its words, Choi Dae replied. The council claimed to stand for justice but did nothing when justice was needed. We will do the opposite. We will act and let our actions prove our values, Nahai accepted. Within hours, she was addressing the first gathering of potential Accord members. Species large and small, powerful and weak, came to hear what humanity was offering. The Terran Accord has 3 principles, Nahai explained. First, justice is a right, not a privilege. If you are wronged, you will be heard. If you are attacked, you will be defended. Second, no species is inherently superior. We judge governments by their actions, not by how old their civilization is. Third, military force exists to protect the innocent, not to dominate the weak. Ambassador Reth of the Tovans stood. These are beautiful words, but the council also had beautiful words. Why should we trust that the Accord will be different? Nahai met his eyes steadily. Because we are starting by keeping a promise. Every species that suffered under Krull aggression will receive reparations. Every colony that was destroyed will receive aid to rebuild. Every war criminal will face trial. We are not asking you to trust our words. We are asking you to judge our actions. The first members began signing the Accord Charter that same day. The Tovans joined first, remembering their 17 lost colonies. Then came the Silan, Observer Thel's species who valued truth and saw that humanity spoke it. More followed. By the end of the day, 43 species had joined. By the end of the week, that number would double. Not everyone joined. Overseer Veltric and the remnants of the old council refused, claiming that the Accord was simply another empire with better marketing. Several powerful species rejected membership, unwilling to accept that they were equals with species they had long dominated. Nahai addressed their concerns publicly. We do not require anyone to join. The Accord exists for those who choose to believe in its principles. Those who prefer the old system are welcome to maintain it. But they should know that humanity will defend Accord members against aggression, wherever it comes from. The implied threat was clear. The old council could continue to exist, but it would no longer be able to protect its members who committed crimes. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted and everyone knew it. Admiral Kang Tae announced his retirement. He had done what he set out to do, and he had no desire to become a permanent military dictator. His final act as commander of human forces was to establish the Accord Defense Academy, where officers from all member species would train together. We must teach the next generation not just how to fight, he told the first class of cadets. We must teach them why we fight and how to know when to stop fighting. War is sometimes necessary, but it should never be the first choice, and it should always be limited by principles. Captain Lee Hyun, who had survived the destruction of New Seoul and delivered Admiral Kang Tae's message to the council, became an instructor at the academy. He taught young officers about the cost of war, showing them footage of burning colonies and destroyed fleets. He made sure they understood that every strategic decision had human consequences. Lieutenant Han Yu, whose impossible flight had inspired the galaxy, declined offers to become a hero or celebrity. She returned to medical school, determined to become the doctor she had been training to be before the war interrupted her life. When reporters asked her about her heroics, she said simply, "I did what needed to be done. Now I am doing what I always wanted to do." There is no contradiction there. Captain Kim Woo continued his military service but with a different focus. He led teams training Krull civilians in self-governance and justice. The Krull people, freed from the war caste that had ruled them for centuries, were learning how to build a society based on something other than conquest. On the Krull homeworld, a monument was erected at the site where Emperor Zalthos had taken his life. The inscription, written in both Krull and human languages, read, "Here died the last emperor of the Krull Dominion. May we remember his mistakes and learn from them. May we build a future where honor comes from protecting others, not from conquering them." Observer Thel wrote a comprehensive history of the war, carefully documenting every battle, every decision, every consequence. His work became required reading in schools across the Accord. He concluded his history with a simple observation. Humanity won the war not because they were the strongest, but because they understood that strength without justice is just another form of tyranny. The Galactic Council continued to exist, but it was a shadow of its former self. Species left one by one, seeing that the Accord offered them something the Council never had: actual protection, actual justice, actual equality. Within a year, only 12 species remained in the Council, clinging to the old ways and old hierarchies. Overseer Velthric, who had dismissed humanity as children playing at war, lived long enough to see his entire civilization request membership in the Accord. He died a broken figure, remembered as the leader who was too blind to see that the galaxy was changing. 3 years after the war, Ambassador Nahai stood in the Accord chamber and heard a familiar plea for justice. A small species reported that raiders were attacking their merchant ships. Pirates were taking their citizens. Their government was too weak to stop it. The old Nahai would have filed reports, made requests, asked for committees to study the matter. The new Nahai simply nodded and said, "We will handle it." Within a week, Accord forces had eliminated the pirate bases. Within a month, the captured criminals faced trial. Within 3 months, the small species was rebuilding its merchant fleet, protected by Accord patrols. No one dismissed their concerns. No one told them to be patient. No one suggested that cultural differences excused piracy. Justice was served quickly, efficiently, and fairly. This became the pattern. Species joined the Accord not because humanity forced them, but because the Accord worked. When members were threatened, they were defended. When members had disputes, they were mediated fairly. When members needed help, they received it. President Choi Dae, nearing the end of his term, gave one final speech. "We did not want to fight the 6-Day War. We tried everything possible to avoid it. But when war became necessary, we fought it with every tool we had, limited only by our principles. We showed the galaxy that patience is not weakness unless it becomes an excuse for inaction. We showed that mercy is not foolishness unless it enables evil. We showed that humans can be ruthless without being cruel." He paused, looking out at representatives from over 100 species. "The galaxy is not perfect. The Accord is not perfect. But we are building something better than what came before. A place where justice is not a privilege of the strong, where the weak are protected, where every voice matters. This is what we fought for. This is what we will continue to defend." On Earth, in a garden where Nahai once sat exhausted after 3 years of diplomatic failures, a memorial was built. It listed the names of every human who died in the 6-Day War. Below those names, it listed every civilian killed on New Sol. At the bottom, in letters carved deep into stone, was a simple phrase that we remembered, we acted, we built something better. Children played near the memorial, laughing and running through gardens that their parents had fought to protect. Above them, ships from a dozen species came and went from Earth's orbital stations, bringing trade and friendship and cooperation. The galaxy had learned a lesson in 6 days that some species had failed to learn in millennia. Peace is not maintained by ignoring aggression. Justice is not achieved by endless patience with injustice. Sometimes the only way to build a better world is to destroy the systems that make the world worse. And if you are strong enough, patient enough, and principled enough, you can do all of that without losing your soul in the process. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons, not tactics, not military might, but the example that power and principle could exist together, that strength and mercy were not opposites, and that the truly civilized species were those who chose peace first, but could wage war when peace was denied to them. The 6-Day War became a turning point in galactic history, not because of how it was fought, but because of what came after. Humanity proved that you could shatter an empire in a week and then spend years building something better from the pieces. And in the end, that was the real victory.